We're going to start making AJAX requests to our backend so we can log in the user. But before we actually start doing that, let's just take care of this. And this is actually coming up from our app.js, if we check that out, or rather our bootstrap.js. And what is happening is Laravel would automatically try to register the CSRF token as a common header with Axios so that all outgoing HTTP requests automatically have it attached. But then, how does it do this? It simply gets a meta tag called CSRF token from the head of the document. And if it doesn't find that, it console.logs the error that we find here. And since I changed my template, that's why we don't have that. So let's go ahead and stick that in. So we have a meta, and the name is going to be equal to CSRF token, and the content is equal to, then we just need to call our CSRF token method. Okay, so we refresh, and now that error is gone away. If we view our page, sure enough, we have our CSRF token injected into the page. Awesome. So we can now make AJAX requests to our server using Axios and Vue.js. Let's go ahead and take care of this. In our login.view, we need to start doing some work, right? So I know I'm going to be sending the email, password, and remember token field to the server. Therefore, why don't I just set that up? I'm going to change the placeholder to email, and vmodel is going to be equal to email. I'm going to change this to vmodel password. And for our remember me field, I just need to say vmodel equals remember. Awesome. So let's define these properties on our model. So we'll have our data method, which returns an object, and we'll have our email initialized to an empty string, our password initialized to an empty string also, and our remember initialized to true. Okay, so if we go ahead and just try to take a look, sure enough, this is automatically checked for us. And if we check out our view tools, we have our view login, which has all that data for us. So if we actually try to change this using vm0 that remember equals false, then we see automatically it actually deactivates the checkbox right here. So it means we're actually successfully binding to this form. Let's continue. Now we want this button to be deactivated when the user's data is not actually correct, right? So what we're going to be doing is actually creating a computed property to take care of validation for us. So let's just go ahead and say computed, and we're going to have an is valid login form method or computed property. And this is simply going to return true or false. Now we are going to be checking if the email is a valid email and if the password is a valid password, right? So let's just start simply by saying return this.email and this.password. When we want to submit the form, we're going to check for that property. So right here where we have our login button here, we're going to say bind the disabled property to is valid login form. So obviously we need the not, right? So if it's invalid, then we're going to have disabled set to true. Let's check this out. So if we open our login, sure enough, we have this button disabled. But if we put in something here and something here, it's automatically enabled. So why don't we have a method that actually checks if the email is a valid email? So let's just say JavaScript check valid email, and this is simply going to be using regular expressions to check for that. But since I don't want to actually get deep into that, we're simply going to copy the method. So here's a method for that to check valid email. So I'm going to come into this component right here, and I'm going to create a methods property, and this is going to be our first method. So validate email, right? So let's format this a little. Validate email, or let's just change this to email is valid. And what it does is it uses this regular expression to test a value that is passed to it. Therefore, let's just pass this.email. So if this.email passes this test, return true. Else, let's just return false. So this method is simply going to validate an email for us. Then what we could do is actually call this method return this.email is valid and this.password. So let's try that out. We have our login form. We put in gibberish. It's not activated, but we simply try to put in a valid email and automatically our button is activated. Wow, that works, right? So our email method is called every time the email property changes. Okay, so let's continue building our form in the next